In this video, I want to give you an opportunity to practice taking frequency data on a behavior. So what I'm going to do is put up a video of a cat, and I have muted the sound on this, so you shouldn't be hearing any sound effects. If you do, just quickly kind of mute your device because that ruins it. And what I want you to do is, as you watch the video, count, so take a frequency, count the number of times the cat hits the printer. Okay, here we go. Okay, so at this point, I would ask you then, how many hits did you get? Now, in classes, typically I'll get, 23, 22, 21, 26. And the point is, I will get different numbers. And so I want to ask you, why would it be that two people watching the exact same video might get different numbers? Well, there are a number of reasons. At the beginning, it was a little bit hard to see. The camera was kind of moving, so your observation conditions weren't perfect. And then the other thing that comes up is sometimes people weren't sure what counted as a hit. So there might have been a couple times where the cat sort of reached, but maybe didn't actually make physical contact with the printer. Or some people only count when they think it actually hit the printer and not just the paper. And that's an issue of what? It's operational definition. So you and your observer or your other observer have to agree at what exactly are we going to count versus not count. Now, this gets into the issue of Interrater reliability. And this is absolutely crucial when you're doing behavioral observations. You can't just design a study by yourself, go out, do all the observations, and put your data out there and say, this is what I found. You have to have at least one other person do the same observations you did just for, a couple of periods or on some practice state observations. But you have to demonstrate that you have high enough interrater reliability. Your book talks about, I think it's a Cohen's way to do this. There are a couple different ways you can get a number that shows, how reliable of your two observers are. And a correlation coefficient is another way. And so you want it to be fairly high, again, depending on the data. I mean, something in the 80% agreement, 90%. It depends on what you're watching. So something like that cat, you high 80, 90% agreement would probably be fine. If we were taking data on something, like if we were in a room and there were 50 odd people there, and we wanted to count the number of people, I would expect us to be able to get to 100% agreement. Going, well, you said there were 47, I think there's 51. We'll just do it again, right? Practice. And that's one of the ways you get your interrater reliability to go up if it's too low, is to practice, and you get better, you refine your operational definitions, make sure you have good viewing. And this is important because when I publish my paper with behavioral data, I want people to agree with my results and my conclusions. And if I'm a terrible observer, if I can only have inter-observer reliability around 50-some%, that's like I'm a broken bathroom scale, or I'm a, I'm a terrible ruler, and what I'm giving you is not good data. If we can't even agree half the time on what we saw, well, that's not good data. I have to find a different way to collect this data, or a different operational definition, or I have to do something. Because if an observer must be able to demonstrate that I'm a reliable instrument to collect this behavioral data. So that's what Interrater reliability does, and absolutely crucial. And in a study, you do it at the beginning to make sure your observers are all doing the same thing. But you have to periodically check, because there's this thing called the observer drift. Whereas you start in a study and you're collecting behavior, as you go, you may drift away from how you were originally doing it. You may get more precise. You may recognize things that you didn't see before and you're counting them now where you weren't counting them before. I know one issue at the Zoo Atlanta was that we had a couple of behaviors that were very rare. And so we might, not see them for a few days, and then they pop up and you kind of think like, have I been collecting this behavior, or, has it not happened, or did I just miss it? And so one of the rules we had is every day, to avoid that situation, every day when somebody showed up to do their behavioral observations, they had to absolutely read every word of the ethogram. So they would remind themselves of maybe things that they didn't see every day and were rare. So to lessen the chance that you would actually miss them and forget you were supposed to record that particular behavior. And again, we did have to have, like at the beginning, the middle of the summer, and the end, we had to demonstrate that our observers had a high enough reliability. Kind of an interesting thing there is we're getting kind of low reliabilities on these behaviors. Some of them are like in the 70%. It really needs to be up at least in the 80 range. And, we'd sit there and we'd take data and we'd compare, like, oh, we're not really close enough. And so what we realized after talking about it and trying to figure out why can't we get higher reliabilities is that because the zoo has very natural enclosures, and so there's lots of plants and stuff. And so if someone's standing in one place and the other observer is standing a few feet away, because we don't want to hear each other quietly whispering the behavior into our tape recorders, that could be enough that the view we got was different. Like, so there might be a palm frond blocking a little something, or, and so what we ended up having to do is we did some focal animal samples when somebody would crouch down with their tape recorder and the other person would like kind of put their head over their head, like stand over them, hunch over them. So we had about the same, view, and then we had to quietly pick our data so we could really hear it. And that did it. Like all of a sudden we're like, oh, now we know we are seeing the same thing. It was kind of a funny thing. I even wore a little earplug so we wouldn't hear each other. We'd just whisper. And that got our reliabilities up. So we're like, okay, we are taking data the same way, and that's what we needed to know. And then we can go ahead and just go, okay, so you do, these sessions, you go over and do these sessions, and at some point we're going to do another reliability check to make sure we haven't changed somehow what we're doing and we haven't had behavioral drift. All right. So hopefully that'll help you if you're doing at least frequency data, but go ahead and get those labs done.